My sister lived rent-free in my house for 6 years with her two kids. But when my wife wanted a garden, she called the police on us, so I legally evicted her, and now the whole family says I'm a monster. I'm 32 years old, work in a logistics warehouse, and I still can't believe I had to kick my sister out of my own house after 6 years of her living there for free. And when I say free, I mean literally without paying a cent, no rent, no utilities, nothing. And now it turns out I'm the villain of the story because my wife wanted to make a garden in the yard of our house. Our house. But anyway, I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense. When Melissa was 19 years old, she got pregnant. She's my younger sister, like 5 years younger than me, and at that time she was still living with our parents. The guy who got her pregnant disappeared as soon as he found out. Typical coward loser, and my parents told her she had to leave the house because they weren't going to support a baby. Yeah, they were pretty harsh with her, but my parents have always been the type who believe in consequences and responsibility, you know. So Melissa had nowhere to go. She was working at a coffee shop making minimum wage, and I had just bought my house. A 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, nothing fancy, but it was mine. So I told her she could come live with me temporarily. Until the baby was born and she could get organized, get a better job, find her own place. Temporary. That was the word I used. Temporary. Connor was born and Melissa kept living with me. I worked long shifts at the warehouse, sometimes nights, and honestly it didn't bother me that much having her there. The house felt less empty. And plus she helped with some things, cleaned a bit, cooked occasionally. Of course I paid for everything. The food, the diapers, electricity, water, everything. But she was my sister, right? And Connor was my nephew. I thought it was the right thing to do, that eventually she would save up money and leave. But a year passed, then 2, and Melissa was still there. Every time I asked her when she was planning to move out, she'd tell me she was saving up, that she just needed a bit more time, that it was hard being a single mother, and that I didn't understand how expensive everything was. When Connor was like 3 years old, Melissa dated another guy for a few months and got pregnant again, and yeah, the guy also disappeared when he found out. Seriously, my sister has a special talent for picking losers. So now she was going to have 2 kids and obviously couldn't leave, or so she told me. Liam was born, and suddenly my 3-bedroom house felt much smaller. The kids shared one room, Melissa had the other, and I was still in mine. Toys were everywhere. There was always noise, always some drama with diapers or food or whatever. About 4 years ago, I met Hannah. She worked in human resources for a company that made deliveries to our warehouse, and we became friends first, then started dating. From the beginning, I told her that my sister lived with me with her 2 kids, and Hannah was super understanding about it. She said she thought it was admirable that I helped my family, that it was a sign that I was a good person. But she also asked me, like 3 months into dating, when Melissa was planning to move out, and I didn't know what to answer because, honestly, I didn't know. I had stopped asking Melissa because every time I did, we ended up in an argument where she threw in my face how difficult her life was and how I didn't understand anything because I didn't have kids. Hannah and I got engaged after 2 years of dating and got married last year. All that time she kept living in her apartment and I in my house with Melissa and the kids. Melissa went to the wedding, by the way, and everything seemed normal between the two of them. Although Hannah had mentioned to me several times that she thought it was weird that Melissa never talked about plans to move out or get her own place. After the wedding, Hannah obviously moved in with me, to her house. Well, technically it's my house because I bought it before we got married, but you know, it's our house now. And that's when things got tense. Melissa kind of expected everything to stay the same, that Hannah would just adapt to the dynamic we already had. But Hannah had her own ideas about how our house should be, which seems completely reasonable to me considering it's her house too. Melissa complained that Hannah moved her things, that Hannah asked her to clean up her mess, that Hannah wanted to use the kitchen at certain times. Normal things, come on, it's not like Hannah was being some crazy control freak or anything. She just wanted, I don't know, to live in her own house without tripping over toys all the time or having to ask Melissa if she could use the oven. Hannah is super passionate about gardening. It's like her main hobby. In her previous apartment, she had a bunch of plants on the balcony and always talked about how someday she wanted to have a real garden. When she moved in with me, she looked at the front yard, which was basically just neglected grass and a couple of dead bushes, and got excited about the idea of making something nice there. She started planning this garden project, researched native plants, designed everything on paper, looked for contractors. I told her to go ahead, that it was her house and she could do whatever she wanted with the garden. I spent like $3,000 on that project, between materials and hiring the guys to do the heavy work. What happened next was basically the beginning of the end. Hannah hired the contractors to come on a Saturday morning to start working on the garden. They were going to remove all the old grass, level the ground, install borders for the flower beds, all that stuff. I was working that day, morning shift that started at 6, and Hannah didn't tell Melissa that the guys were coming. Why would she have to tell her? It's our house, it's our garden. And frankly, after 6 years living for free, Melissa didn't have a say in what we did with the property. Or so I thought. The contractors arrived around 9 in the morning and started working. They had one of those machines to remove grass. They made a tremendous noise. Melissa came out in her pajamas, super angry, yelling at them, asking what they were doing. Hannah came out behind her and tried to explain that they were making a garden. But Melissa started yelling at her that that was the space where her kids played, that they couldn't just destroy the yard without consulting her, that she lived there and had rights. The contractors just stood there, not knowing what to do. The guy operating the machine turned it off, and Hannah tried to calm Melissa down, but my sister was out of control, literally screaming like crazy. Then Sharon appeared. Sharon is the next-door neighbor, a woman about 40 years old who's friends with Melissa because they're both single mothers and their kids play together sometimes. Sharon came out of her house and asked Melissa what was going on, and Melissa told her that Hannah was destroying her house without permission. Her house, as if it were hers. Sharon, who apparently is a lawyer or something, or at least thinks she knows about laws, pulled out her phone and called the police. She said there was unauthorized work on a property and that they were possibly violating tenant rights. Can you believe it? She called the police to my house over a garden. The cops arrived like half an hour later. By that time, Melissa was crying, Hannah was super upset but trying to stay calm, and the contractors basically wanted to leave because who wants to deal with that drama? The cops talked to everyone, reviewed the situation, and it turns out that since Melissa had lived there for more than 30 days, technically she did have certain rights as a tenant, even though she didn't pay rent. One of the cops, an older guy who looked tired of life, told Hannah that it was better if she left the house for that night so things could calm down. Hannah had to pack a bag with her things and went to stay with a friend in our own house. My wife had to leave our house because of my sister, who had been living there for free for 6 years. I got home from work around 3 in the afternoon, completely oblivious to all the drama that had happened. I saw that the front yard was half destroyed, with the dirt torn up and the contractor's tools scattered around, and I thought maybe they had stopped for lunch or something. I went into the house, and Melissa was in the living room with the kids, looking all victimized. I asked her what had happened, and she started telling me her version, that Hannah had brought people to destroy the yard without telling her, that she had kicked them out, that Sharon had had to call the police because Hannah was getting aggressive. Aggressive. My wife, who's the calmest person I know. I called Hannah immediately, and she told me what really happened. She was crying on the phone, telling me she couldn't believe they had kicked her out of her own house, that she felt humiliated and angry, and that Melissa was completely out of control. And she was right. I was furious, like more furious than I had been in years. I hung up with Hannah and went straight to talk to Melissa. I told her that this was unacceptable, that Hannah was my wife, and that this was our house, not hers. Melissa started with the usual drama, that I didn't understand how difficult her situation was, that she and her kids had nowhere to go, that after 6 years I couldn't just kick her out like that. But then she said something that left me frozen. She said that after living there for 6 years, she had tenant rights, and that I couldn't kick her out without following the corresponding legal process. That she had talked to Sharon, and that Sharon had told her I would have to give her a formal 60-day notice, and that if I tried to kick her out sooner, she could sue me. My own sister, who I had been helping for 6 years for free, threatening to sue me in my own house. I couldn't process it seriously. I stood there not knowing what to say, because part of me wanted to scream at her to get out immediately. But another part knew she was probably right about the legal stuff. I told Melissa she had until the end of the month to leave. She told me that wasn't legal, that she needed 60 days. I told her I didn't give a damn what was legal, to get out of my house. But after calming down a bit and talking to Hannah, we decided to consult with a lawyer. We spent another $500 on a legal consultation, and the lawyer confirmed what Melissa had said. Since she had lived there for more than 6 years, even though she didn't pay rent, she had rights as a tenant, and I had to give her a formal eviction notice with 60 days' notice. If I didn't do it and kicked her out by force, she could sue me and would probably win. It was one of the most frustrating things in my life, having to follow a legal process to get someone out of my house who should never have been there that long in the first place. But we had no choice. I hired the lawyer to prepare the formal eviction notice, and I delivered it to Melissa personally. She read it, started crying, and told me I was a bad brother, that I was choosing my wife over my own blood, that I was leaving her kids homeless. The kids were there when all this happened. Connor is like 9 years old now and Liam 6. And obviously they were confused and scared. I felt like garbage. I'm not going to lie. After giving her the notice, I went to talk to Sharon. I knocked on her door, and when she opened, I told her we needed to talk. Sharon tried to defend Melissa, saying I was being cruel, and how could I kick my sister and nephews out on the street. I explained that Melissa had lived in my house for 6 years without paying absolutely anything, that I had supported her whole family all that time, and that she had no right to decide what I could or couldn't do in my own house. I told her I appreciated that she was Melissa's friend, but that calling the police had been completely unnecessary, and that basically she had made the whole situation worse. Sharon closed the door in my face. We haven't spoken since that day. The next 60 days were horrible. Melissa dragged her feet with everything, didn't pack anything, spent time complaining to her friends about how terrible I was. Hannah came back to the house, but the tension was unbearable. Melissa and Hannah didn't talk to each other at all, didn't even look at each other. I tried to keep the peace, but it was impossible. The kids obviously felt all the tension, and that broke my heart because they weren't to blame for any of this. Connor asked me once why they couldn't live with us anymore. How do you explain to a 9-year-old kid that his mom stayed way longer than she should have, and that now things are complicated? Melissa told the whole family what was happening, obviously painting me as the villain. My parents called me to say, it was being very harsh, but when I explained the whole situation to them, including that Melissa had threatened to sue me, they went quiet. I think that's when they realized things were really bad. My mom tried to talk to Melissa to convince her to cooperate and look for a place quietly, but Melissa wouldn't listen. She was determined to make this as difficult as possible. I tried to help her as much as I could, despite everything. I looked for apartments that were within her budget, offered to pay her the deposit and first month's rent for a new place. Even told her I'd buy her basic furniture if she needed it. But she rejected all my help, saying that if I was kicking her out, then I had no right to tell her where to live or how to handle her situation. It was like talking to a wall. Hannah told me to stop trying, that Melissa was being manipulative, and that she probably expected me to feel so guilty that I'd tell her she could stay. But that wasn't going to happen. I had made my decision. About 2 weeks before the 60-day deadline was up, Melissa finally started packing. She borrowed boxes, started separating things, the whole process. She never told me where she was going to live, and I didn't ask. She was probably going to stay with some friend, or maybe she found some small apartment. I don't know. What I do know is that during those 2 weeks, the house was total chaos, with boxes everywhere, the kids more restless than usual because they knew they were moving, Melissa with a funeral face all the time. On the last day of the deadline, Melissa finished packing. She had a bunch of boxes, trash bags full of clothes, toys everywhere. She had rented a truck and asked some friends for help loading everything. I offered to help load the boxes, not because I wanted to, but because I felt I should. I don't know. Maybe to ease some of the guilt I still felt. Melissa accepted my help without saying much, We basically ignored each other while we loaded her stuff into the Cowler truck. When we finished, Melissa put the kids in the car, Connor gave me a quick hug before getting in, and Liam didn't even look at me. Melissa stood in front of me and said, "I hope you're happy with your decision." That was it. She got in the car and left. We haven't talked since then. It's been like 2 months now. My mom tells me that Melissa is living in a 2-bedroom apartment across town, that the kids are fine, that she's getting government assistance to pay rent. I send her money occasionally through my mom, like $200 or $300, but I have no direct contact with her. Hannah finished her garden. It turned out beautiful. Honestly, it has roses and lavender and a bunch of plants I don't know the names of, but they look good. She says that every time she looks at it, she feels happy and at peace. I still feel weird every time I look at it, like all this drama was caused by a garden, you know. But I know it wasn't just the garden, it was everything. It was 6 years of boundaries. I never established. Of saying yes when I should have said no a long time ago. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Not with kicking her out. I know that was necessary, but with how I handled everything from the beginning. I should have set a clear time limit from day one. I should have charged her some rent, or at least help with expenses. I should have been firmer when she started staying longer than we had agreed. But I guess it's easy to say all that now. Looking back, at that moment, I just wanted to help my sister. I wanted to be a good brother. And in the end, I ended up being the bad guy anyway. Hannah tells me to stop feeling guilty, that I did more than most people would have done, that 6 years is a ridiculously long time to support someone financially without any kind of reciprocity. And she's right, I know. But it's still my sister. And those were my nephews, and now I basically have no relationship with any of them. I don't know if someday Melissa will understand why I had to do what I did, or if she'll always think I betrayed her. Maybe in a few years, when the kids are older and she's more stable, we can talk about this in a calmer way. Or maybe not. Maybe this is just our new reality, where we're basically strangers who share blood. The house feels different now. Quieter, more hours. Hannah can leave her things wherever she wants without someone moving them. We can watch whatever we want on TV. There are no toys on the floor. It should feel good, and in many ways it does feel good. But there are moments, like when I walk by the room, that was the kids' and is now Hannah's office, where I remember Connor and Liam running down the hallway, and I get a knot in my stomach. I don't miss them living here, honestly, because the last few months were unbearable. But I do miss how things were before everything went bad, when Melissa and I still got along, when there wasn't so much resentment involved. I guess in the end, this is one of those situations, where there are no winners, where we all lose something. Melissa lost her home and her brother's support. I lost my relationship with my sister and nephews. Hannah had to deal with months of drama when she was just starting her married life. The only thing we gained was our house back, our privacy, our space. And yeah, we have a nice garden now. But the cost was high. Very high. I'm not sure if it was worth it, honestly. But I'm also not sure what else I could have done differently at that specific moment when everything exploded. Sometimes I think that no matter what I had done, the result would have been the same. Melissa had gotten too used to living without responsibilities, and I had allowed that to happen for too long. It was inevitable that it would end badly. So here I am, in my house that's finally just mine and Hannah's, looking at the garden that caused all this mess, wondering if I'm ever going to stop feeling like garbage for having kicked out my sister. Probably not. But I don't regret it either, you know? Because at the end of the day, I also deserve to live in my own house without drama, without feeling like a stranger in my own space. And Hannah definitely deserved better than what she had to go through in her first months of marriage. Maybe with time, things will get better with Melissa, or maybe not. For now, this is what it is.